Ebra, a blind mother abandoned by her husband, survives by begging at a junction with her twins, Daniel and Utah. Marshall Jacobs, a cold CEO who views her as a nuisance, nearly strikes her with his car during a massive storm. Struck by her dignity during their confrontation, Marshall eventually rescues her to a clinic, only to discover the shocking reality of his life. If you're just tuning into this channel, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to share with your friends and family, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments section. Every morning at exactly 7:30, the heavy iron gates of the estate swung open to release Marshall's black SUV into the chaotic pulse of Lagos. Inside the vehicle, the air was chilled to a precise 16 degrees, smelling of expensive leather and the faint citrusy scent of Marshall's cologne. He sat in the back seat, his face a rigid mask of focus as he scrolled through international stocks on his tablet, his tailored dark gray suit without a single crease. He was a man who lived by order, precision, and the belief that success was a choice, and failure an even more deliberate one. As the car approached the familiar expressway junction, the traffic slowed to a crawl. Marshall didn't need to look up to know they were near Ebra's spot. Without fail, his eyes would drift toward the window, drawn by a habit he refused to acknowledge as curiosity. There she was, hunched on her low wooden stool, a yellow wrapper faded by the harsh sun clinging to her frame. To Marshall, she wasn't a figure of tragedy, she was a symbol of disorder. He watched as she shifted Utah against her chest while Daniel remained strapped to her back, their small forms appearing like extensions of her own tired body. A sharp hiss escaped Marshall's teeth, a sound of pure irritation that cut through the quiet hum of the engine. "Look at that, Andrew," he muttered, his voice dripping with cold judgment. Another morning of the same spectacle. How can a woman be so irresponsible? To bring children into this world, just to use them as props for begging? If you can't afford them, you have no business having them. In the driver's seat, Mr. Andrew kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel in a disciplined silence. He had heard these words 100 times before, yet he never offered a reply, knowing Marshall's heart was currently a stone that no amount of pity could soften. Marshall looked away, disgusted, as the SUV finally accelerated, leaving the blind woman and her children behind in a cloud of exhaust and dust, unaware that the order he so cherished was about to be shattered. The sky over Lagos didn't just break, it shattered. By 6 a.m., the horizon was a bruised purple, and then the deluge began, a relentless vertical wall of water that turned the streets into churning brown rivers. Inside her cramped face room, Ebra felt the dampness rising through the floorboards, but her focus was entirely on the small shivering heat radiating from Utah's body. The boy's breath was shallow, his skin burning with a fever that seemed to defy the cold rain drumming on the corrugated zinc roof. She had no medicine and no way to measure the danger, only the terrifying instinct of a mother who knew her child was slipping away. Desperation drove her out. Wrapping the twins tightly against her chest with her last dry anchor cloth, Ebra stepped into the storm. The world was a chaotic roar of water and wind. She couldn't see the deep puddles or the open gutters. She could only feel the icy water rising to her ankles, then her shins. "Somebody help me. Please help my child," she cried out, but her voice was swallowed by the thunder. Blind and disoriented, she wandered away from the safety of the sidewalk, her feet sliding on the slick pavement as she moved toward the center of the expressway. Nearby, Marshall sat in the back of his SUV, his jaw tight as he watched the wipers struggle against the downpour. He was in a foul mood, delayed by the weather, when a flash of yellow fabric appeared through the gray haze. "Felix, stop!" he roared. The brakes screeched, the heavy vehicle skidding and fishtailing on the flooded asphalt before coming to a jarring halt inches from Ebra. She stood frozen in the headlights, soaked to the bone, her blind eyes wide and unblinking as the rain lashed her face. In that terrifying silence following the screech of tires, the only sound was the weak, thin wail of her sick son. The tires of the white SUV screeched, slicing through the rhythm of the torrential morning rain like a desperate scream. Marshall's heart slammed against his ribs as the vehicle skidded to a violent halt, missing the woman by mere inches. Through the windshield he saw her, a drenched, shivering figure standing directly in the path of his car, her sightless eyes facing nothingness while a baby, strapped tightly to her chest, let out a thin, pitiful cry. Anger, fueled by a sudden, terrifying jolt of adrenaline, surged through him. He leaned forward and pressed the button, lowering the glass halfway as the cold Lagos rain splashed against the expensive leather interior of the SUV. His voice was a sharp blade, cutting through the storm before his mind could catch up to his pulse. "Are you blind?" he bellowed, the words dripping with the same callous judgment he had carried in his chest for years. Ebra stood there, soaked from head to toe, her wrapper clinging to her like a second skin. Slowly, with a calm that felt heavier than the storm itself, she turned her face toward the sound of Marshall's voice. There was no flinch, no flash of anger in return, only a quiet, haunting dignity. "Yes, sir," she answered, her voice barely rising above the roar of the rain. "I am blind." The air inside the car turned to ice. Marshall's mouth opened slightly, but the fierce lecture he had prepared died in his throat. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a nuisance or a roadside beggar. He was looking at a human being fighting a battle he couldn't comprehend. He stared at her, really stared, as the silence between them stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, unable to meet the hollow gaze of the woman he had just insulted, Marshall wound the window back up and turned his face away. "Let's go," he muttered flatly, but as the car steered around her, the quiet weight of her words began to echo in his mind like a broken record. The following morning, the glass walls of Marshall's penthouse office offered a panoramic view of the Lagos skyline, but for once, the billionaire CEO found no satisfaction in the empire he had built. He sat in his leather chair, the heavy silence of the room pressing against him. Normally, his mind was a steel trap for data and numbers, but today it was occupied by a single grainy image, a woman in a yellow wrapper, drenched to the bone, standing with a haunting stillness in the middle of a flooded road. Gloria entered the office with a stack of urgent contracts, her heels clicking softly against the marble. "Good morning, sir," she said, placing the files on his desk with her usual precision. "The board is waiting for your signature on the merger, and the investors from London are on line 1. Marshall didn't move. His eyes were unfocused, his fingers drumming a slow rhythmic beat against the mahogany surface. He wasn't seeing the contracts. He was hearing a voice, quiet and devoid of bitterness, saying, "Yes, sir. I'm blind." Gloria paused, her brow furrowing as she watched her boss. In all her years of service, she had never seen him like this. Marshall was a man of action, often described as having a stone in his chest instead of a heart. Yet, there was a strange hollow look in his eyes, a flicker of something that looked dangerously like regret. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked tentatively. "You haven't touched your coffee, and you've missed 2 briefings." Marshall finally looked up, but he seemed to be looking through her. "Gloria," he said, his voice lower and rougher than usual. "Do you believe someone can be lost in plain sight for years?" Before she could answer, he turned his chair back toward the window. The gray sky outside mirrored the turbulence in his soul. He was a man who owned everything, yet he was suddenly gripped by the terrifying realization that he had allowed the most important thing he ever lost to stand in the rain while he drove past in a dry SUV. The haunting had begun, and he knew he wouldn't find peace until he returned to that junction. The following morning, the executive floor of Marshall's headquarters felt colder than usual. He sat behind his mahogany desk, but the spreadsheets and multi-billion naira contracts were mere blurs against the persistent image of a rain-soaked woman standing defiantly in the middle of the road. The ghost of her voice, "Yes, sir, I'm blind," vibrated in his ears until the silence of his office became unbearable. Marshall stood abruptly, grabbing his blazer. "Mr. Andrew, get the car," he barked into the intercom. Minutes later, the SUV was weaving through the chaotic morning traffic of Lagos, returning to the very spot Marshall usually ignored. When they arrived, the wooden stool was empty, and the familiar splash of yellow wrapper was gone. An unfamiliar tightness gripped Marshall's chest, a sensation he hadn't felt since he was a young boy lost in a crowded park. "Ask them," Marshall commanded, his voice tight. Mr. Andrew rolled down the window, calling out to the street hawkers and shoe shiners who dominated the junction. Most ignored the rich man in the tinted car, but Marshall, driven by a compulsion he couldn't name, stepped out into the dust himself. "The woman who sits here with the twins," he demanded, his expensive shoes treading on the same grime Ebra inhabited daily. "Where is she?" A young boy wiping a dirty rag over a boot finally looked up. "Her Pekin get fever," he muttered. "They go that clinic down the road yesterday." Marshall didn't wait for the boy to finish. They sped down the narrow side street until they found a simple white building with paint peeling away like dead skin. Inside, the air was heavy with the sharp scent of antiseptic and the sound of low, tired coughing. There, in a corner of the dim lobby, Marshall found her. Ebra sat on a faded plastic chair, her head tilted upward as if listening to the heavens, her hands protectively folded over the small, shivering forms of Daniel and Utah. She looked smaller here, more fragile, yet her presence commanded the room in a way Marshall's wealth never could. He approached her slowly, his shadow falling over her sightless eyes, his heart beating with a strange, heavy rhythm of guilt. Marshall stood by the hospital's small reception desk, his fountain pen scratching against the paper as he signed a check that would clear Ebres' mounting debt in a single stroke. The doctor looked at the amount, then at Marshall's stone-carved face, but the billionaire offered no explanation. He simply turned and walked back to the plastic chair where Ebra sat, her thin frame still shivering slightly in the sterile air. "Your bills are cleared," he said, his voice dropping to a register of gentleness that even he didn't recognize. "But you cannot return to the streets, not with your sons in this condition." Ebra tilted her head, her blind eyes searching the darkness for the source of this sudden, heavy kindness. When Marshall extended his hand and guided her toward the waiting SUV, she hesitated only for a heartbeat. She felt the cool leather of the interior and the hum of a powerful engine that usually roared past her in mockery, but now it carried her away from the dust of the junction. As the gates of Marshall's mansion swung open with a quiet, expensive hum, the air changed, smelling of freshly cut grass and jasmine instead of exhaust fumes. Marshall helped her out, his hand steady on her elbow as they entered the grand foyer. The house staff had already gathered, their whispers like dry leaves skittering across the marble floor as they stared at the woman in the faded yellow wrapper. Marshall silenced them with a single, icy look. He summoned Mama Doris, the oldest and most trusted of the household, and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "This is Ebra," he announced, his voice ringing through the hall like a decree. "She is my guest. You will prepare the finest room for her and her sons. From this moment, she is to be treated with the same respect as if she were a member of this family. If I hear even a whisper of disrespect, you will answer to me." Ebra stood amidst the opulence she could not see, clutching Daniel and Utah to her chest, her heart racing as she realized the storm had finally led her home. The golden morning light filtered through the high glass windows of Marshall's mansion, but Ebra did not need to see the sun to know the day had begun. While the rest of the household was still adjusting to the quiet hum of the air conditioners, she was already on her knees, her hands moving with practiced precision across the cool marble tiles of the hallway. One twin, Daniel, slept soundly in the nursery under the watchful eye of a caregiver, while Utah's steady breathing from his crib nearby served as her rhythmic anchor. When Mama Doris, the head maid, found her, she gasped in protest. "Madam Ebra, please, Olga said you are a guest." "You should be resting," she whispered, reaching for the damp cloth in Ebra's hand. But Ebra gently pulled back, a soft but firm smile on her face. "Sitting idle is a hunger I cannot stomach, Mama Doris. "My hands must work so my heart can stay still," she replied. Marshall watched from the top of the grand staircase, his arms folded across his chest. Seeing her navigate the vast space by touch and sound alone brought a strange, grounding peace to his restless mind. Later that evening, as the sky bled into shades of deep violet on the patio, he finally broke his long-held silence. "I had a sister once," he said suddenly, his voice thick with a weight he hadn't shared in decades. Ebra tilted her head, her sightless eyes fixed toward the sound of his vulnerability. Marshall continued, describing a sunny afternoon at a children's park that ended in a nightmare. "She was blind, just like you. I was just a boy, and I got distracted for 1 minute. When I turned back, she was gone." He spoke of his mother's terminal grief and the stone he had carried in his chest ever since. Ebra reached out, her fingers brushing the air until they found his hand, offering a silent, steady comfort. "I hope you find her," she whispered softly, unaware that the very silver chain Marshall's sister had worn was currently resting against her own collarbone, hidden beneath her wrapper. The dining room was bathed in the soft amber glow of the crystal chandelier, a stark contrast to the harsh fluorescent lights of the clinic where Marshall had first found her. Ebra sat at the mahogany table, her movements slow and deliberate as she guided a spoon to Utah's mouth. Despite the opulence surrounding her, she remained draped in her quiet, unassuming dignity. Marshall watched her from the head of the table, his silver fork poised in mid-air. He had intended to discuss the quarterly earnings with Gloria, but his gaze was suddenly arrested by a flicker of light at Ebra's throat. As she leaned forward to wipe a stray drop from her son's chin, her faded yellow wrapper shifted. There, clinging to her skin, was a thin silver chain. Marshall's heart gave a violent thud against his ribs, his breath hitching in his chest. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. The unique, intricate twisting of the silver links was a pattern etched into his very soul. It was the exact heirloom his sister had been wearing the day the world swallowed her whole in the park. "Excuse me," he managed to choke out, his voice sounding foreign and hollow in the silent room. He pushed back his chair with a sharp scrape and retreated to his office, his pulse drumming a frantic rhythm in his ears. With trembling hands, he pulled a small, polished wooden box from his desk drawer. He fumbled with the latch until it clicked open, revealing a stack of weathered photographs. There she was, a young, smiling girl with the same sightless, beautiful eyes, wearing the very necklace he had just seen downstairs. The weight of 20 years of guilt and hope crashed down on him. He didn't dare believe it yet, but he couldn't ignore the fire in his blood. Calling Gloria into the room, his face was a mask of pale, terrifying seriousness. "I need you to get me Ebra's toothbrush," he whispered, his voice shaking with the gravity of the secret he was about to uncover. "And call the lab. Tell them I need a DNA test processed immediately. I need to know the truth." The digital report on Marshall's laptop screen glowed with a finality that shattered his world, a 99.99% sibling match. For a long minute, the only sound in the silent office was the ragged rhythm of his breathing. The stone he had carried in his chest for years finally cracked open, releasing a flood of grief and relief that he could no longer contain. He didn't wait for morning. Marshall walked down to the living room where Ebra sat in the shadows, her blind eyes calm, her hands resting gently over the heads of her sleeping sons. As he approached, she tilted her head, recognizing the heavy, trembling presence of the man who had plucked her from the rain. "Marshall," she whispered, sensing the shift in the air. Without a word, the billionaire CEO, the man who once mocked the poor from behind tinted glass, dropped to his knees on the cold marble floor. He gripped her hands, his hot tears falling onto her palms. "I'm sorry, Ebra," he choked out, his voice broken by decades of guilt. "I should have stayed beside you at the park. I lived in luxury while my own flesh and blood suffered on the streets." Ebra reached out, her fingers tracing the tears on his face with a tenderness that spoke of total forgiveness. "If fate brought us back," she said softly, "then I am happy." The transformation was absolute. The mansion, once a silent monument to wealth, became a home filled with the laughter of Daniel and Utah. Marshall made Ebra a director of the family empire, ensuring her name was etched into every success they achieved. To honor their parents' final wish, he opened the Ada Foundation, a sanctuary where the disabled would never be forgotten or insulted again. Standing on the balcony at sunset, Marshall watched his nephews play on the grass, finally understanding that his true wealth wasn't in his accounts, but in the sister he had finally brought home.